Hey folks, this is Grant Estrad and episode 0, the introduction episode to Big Tough Farmer. There's an expression out there that goes something to the effect of you do not have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And that's the mindset of tonight's episode. We're going to go through what a BTF Big Tough Farmer is, where it came from, what our goals are for the channel or this platform that we're doing here, and you know what, we're just going to do it. We're going to crank this out. I'm really not going to go back through this and edit it. We're just going to put it out there for everybody. Being genuine in your messaging is more important oftentimes than your messaging. So I'm not trying to be a dramatic influencer putting on a show for you. We just want to give you the information so that way you can maybe add it to your life and benefit it in some way, shape, or form to you or your friends or family's lives, right? So that's what we're here to do. We are going to be doing a lot of reading in this. This is going to be a little bit of a bookwormy reading, whatever I can get my hands on. Type of show, type of platform, again, whatever it is you want to call it. And so that might be weird to post this on YouTube for the first time in video format if we're going to be doing so much reading. But this is the platform that I just want to do, and I want to roll it out, and this is how we're going to do it. Just something I wrote up. I'm not going to lie. I was having a hard day at the farm. It was cold, wet, and I was physically and mentally drained from inefficiencies and material handling, otherwise known as manually carrying a lot of shit around, and mentally exhausted from the small to non-existent labor pool that a farm has to hire from. In agriculture, currently 1% of the U.S. working force is involved in agriculture in some way, shape, or form. So when you're the owner operator of a farm and then you're seeking staff, there's just a very small pool of people to pull from because only 1% of the population is involved in agriculture. So you can certainly find people to hire, but you have to assume that they have not been trained just because they haven't been exposed to it. Being from New Orleans and the city, when we do social things and go to the proverbial cocktail party and we tell people that we farm for a living, they're very intrigued because they've never met a farmer. They've never talked to a farmer before, and so it's just a small staff and a small group of people to pull from. But I wasn't alone. I had my friends with me along for the ride and helping me with chores. I mean, seriously, how many folks have friends like Jocko Willink and Leif Babin help with chores? Well, I've never met these two individuals. I had them pouring through my earbuds describing what it meant to be a BTF, Big Tough Frogman, through adversity. Then it hit me. I'm a BTF. I'm a Big Tough Farmer. Well, it may be cheesy, silly, whatever for calling yourself a Big Tough Farmer. I don't give a shit. It worked. I pressed on the rest of the day with pride in my work and later reported to my wife, Kate, that I'm a BTF. Let me be clear. While being a BTF does mean that you're physically and emotionally fortified, it also means that you need to be vulnerable and allow others to help you. Simply put, rugged individualism is a myth. I wasn't a BTF that day because I gritted through a shitty day. I was a BTF because I opened myself up to receiving help from two friends that I've never even met. Around the world, farmers are stressed out, feel hopeless, feel isolated, feel used, feel manipulated, and feel abandoned by the community that they feed and grow food for. Farmers, similar to military veterans, have well above average suicide rates, lack of resources to get care and training, and worst of all, are stigmatized and feel ashamed if they allow themselves to be vulnerable to receiving help from others. That's why the BTF motto is sharper every day. as in Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We must develop the skills to be strong yet flexible so we can learn to rely on others in order to grow. I just want to read the sections from the book that I was listening to that day. I took every precaution, planned for every contingency I could think of, but even before we departed our camp, I knew I had overdone it. My rucksack was jammed so full of gear I could barely zip it closed. Then as soon as I jocked up in my op gear, put on my load-bearing equipment, and shouldered my ruck briefly to move out to the vehicles that would transit us to the Marine base on the other side of the river, it felt ridiculously heavy. I began to sense the weight was going to be a problem. When we launched on the patrol on foot, I learned that the Marines utilized a method of sprint and hold. We use cover and move in short bounds, but the Marines' version of cover and move required 2 shooters to hold security, while the next 2 sprinted as fast as they could, all the way to the end of the block. It was a way to mitigate the risk of enemy snipers. They would have to hit a moving target. The process was repeated 2 by 2 as the entire patrol moved kilometer after kilometer through the city block by block in a series of sprints. So he's doing gassers with a shit ton of equipment on him. Very shortly into the foot patrol, I knew I was in trouble. The crushing weight of the rucksack bore down on me. My chest heaved from the effort to breathe, and sweat soaked my clothes. My eye pro, the ballistic glasses we wore to protect our eyes, fogged up completely, and I had to remove them just to see. As SEALs, we took pride in hard physical training and maintaining a high level of conditioning, but I had completely overestimated my ability to carry the weight I brought with me. It was far too much. As my BUDS instructor said when I went through the basic SEAL training course, if you're going to be stupid, you better be strong. The heavy loadout was foolish, and now I was paying the price. Time to suck it up in BTF, which stood for Big Tough Frogman, the unofficial mantra of Charlie Platoon and Task Unit Bruiser. We use BTF as a noun, an adjective, and in this case, a verb. After I read that that day, that really did get me through the day of chores. And I was so interested in that concept. I love natural and social experiments. And so after researching it a little bit more and kind of getting enough confidence to actually share it with other people, David and Ben were working with me, and a couple of other staff were working with me, and so I created a patch that looked like this: BTF, Big Tough Farmer, Staff 2023, Local Cooling Farms. That's our farm. And so I started using that language of we're just going to go BTF this, after explaining to them what BTF was. And they liked it. They dug it. They really got into it. Any excuse really to have a patch. Being a Boy Scout, going through the entire BSA program, we're kind of geek for patches, so I don't need an excuse to make a really cool patch. So I use that patch to get my point across to the crew, and to use our staff here at the farm as a little bit of a social experiment to see if they would get into the BTF mantra. And they did. And the motto of Big Tough Farmer is sharper every day. And so we got into the habit of, if I said BTF, they would say sharper every day. And so as cheesy and as weird and as silly, as playful as it is, it's a very powerful tool when you're working with your team. And for morale, it's just a fantastic thing to do. Planning for these contingencies, this is another part of the book. Planning for the contingencies helped us manage the risk, even risk that in that environment. Jocko added, "You might think that in SEAL teams, we're all big tough frogmen who run to the sound of gunfire no matter what. And for many situations, that's exactly what we did. We have to show courage under fire and be willing to risk our lives, but we can't be foolish. We can't take needless risks that prevents us from accomplishing our strategic mission and endangering our troops. Jocko continued, as leaders, we have to do that smartly by mitigating the risks we can control. Careful evaluation of the risk enables us to develop contingency plans so we can execute in the most effective manner to accomplish the mission with the least amount of risk to our troops. So the first section I read was them doing gassers with a bunch of gear on, and they're feeling it, and they're just going to have to muscle it through. They're going to have to suck it up. Many of us grew up in a suck it up, environment, especially men. We're perceived as being weak if we say that we're having a rough time, especially emotionally. Most men don't even have the proper phraseology to express their emotions. They may say that they're really pissed off or angry, but what they really mean is that they're feeling like hurt and abandoned. And so we've got this one version of BTF where we have to suck it up, and we have to say, hey, we're just gonna go get some. We're gonna get some pain. We're gonna suck it up. We're gonna BTF it, and then we're gonna muscle through it. We're gonna make it work. We're gonna walk it off, right? But the other side is that we have to say, hey, being tough, that's not what it's all about, right? And so there's a strategy that we need to consider, that we can't be foolish. We can't take needless risks. And so one thing that we are going to be discussing here is being vulnerable and seeking help from other people. Many folks think that seeking help is a weakness. Like, you need to call your neighbor to, hey, I need help. Truck got stuck, cow got out, whatever might be broken, I need your help. So a lot of farmers are oftentimes shy or bashful about asking for help because they think that they're going to come across as stupid to their neighbor. When in reality, when you ask your neighbor for help or ask somebody for help, oftentimes, especially when that relationship is a good relationship, is a compliment to the other person, because you're being vulnerable to the other person. That person appreciates that you can be vulnerable with them, and then they're going to come and they're going to help you. So oftentimes when people ask me for help, it's a compliment to me that they were willing to be vulnerable and to let me know that, hey, I needed some help. I needed to talk about this. I was like really stupid, and I did something. We sold a piglet to a customer the other day, and he didn't have to do it, but he texted me that the piglet got out, and one took off and went down the road, and he hasn't found it yet. And I told him, I'm like, bro, that happens to all of us, right? If you have livestock and you've never had an animal get out or get away from you or something like that, then you're just, then there's like two types of livestock farmers out there, right? There's like livestock farmers where they've had animals get out, and then there's livestock farmers that lie about saying that they've never had animals get out. Oh, that book was that was The Dichotomy of Leadership by Willink and Babin. We're going to move on to Extreme Ownership by Willink and Babin, just to kind of beat the BTF drum a little bit, so you feel me, so you understand what I'm talking about. Long before dawn broke the morning, before the day's first call to prayer echoed from the minaret speakers of many mosques across south-central Ramadi, our group of Charlie Platoon SEALs, our EOD operators, who very much a part of our platoon, an interpreter, an Iraqi soldier, and had stealthily moved and patrolled under the cover of darkness through dusty, rubble-strewn streets. We had BTF'd in, as our chief called it. BTF stood for Big Tough Frogman, an unofficial mantra adopted by Charlie Platoon. BTF entailed taking on substantial physical exertion and great risk, and persevering by simply being a big tough frogman. Pushing deep inside enemy territory was a BTF evolution. We knew it likely meant a gunfight was in store for us, what Chief called a big mix-it-up. Our routine for most of these operation and Chiefs' terminology was this: BTF in, big mix it up, BTF out. Then once back on base, we'd hit the mess hall for big chow. We had patrolled out of COP Falcon in the early morning darkness through the densely packed urban neighborhood of the 2-story houses, adjoining compound walls, and heavy-duty metal gates. We BTF'd in on foot for about 1.5 kilometers, carrying our heavy gear and substantial firepower, into another violent and enemy-held neighborhood of the city. An area firmly in the grasp of a brutal insurgency. Driven back from the areas to the east and the west, enemy fighters chose to stand and fight for this dirty patch of ground in the city's geographic center. We took position in a building just up the street from a mosque that frequently rallied to the call of jihad from its minaret speakers to the hundreds of well-armed Muj that occupied this area. So again, this is just an example of them using the phraseology of BTF. And, you know, why do we use the acronym, and why do they use the acronym like that? Is because it picks you up mentally. You know, it's a way to lift your spirits. It's fun. There's play to it. And so that is the reason that I chose Big Tough Farmer. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here to put that into your dialogue. So when you're having a rough day tonight, after you may see this, or tomorrow, you might have that little inner voice inside of you, and you might say, you know what, I'm a BTF and I'm going to be able to suck this up and get through it. It might be raining and muddy and disgusting, and then you're going to tell yourself that you're going to BTF through it. And then you might be having a really rough mentally day, and you might have to say, you know, if I'm really BTF, I'm going to ask for help, and I'm going to call a buddy, and we're gonna hash it out. We're going to talk about it. One reason why I got into the Willink stuff and the Leif Babin stuff and extreme ownership and dichotomy of leadership and Jocko Willink's podcast. Along his podcast is him and Echo Charles. Thank you guys. I listen to y'all all the time. Good inspiration. I got into that because I went to a Friends on Farm course. My buddy Jordan Green, and I didn't know Jordan at the time. I was friends with somebody that was friends with him, and Jordan says get after it a lot on his social media platforms. And so he doesn't know this, but I kept track of how many times over the course of the 2 days that he said get after it. And then I reported back to my friend, who were mutual friends, how many times Jordan said get after it. And so paying attention to him saying get after it, and then me keeping a log of how many times he said that, it kind of like that term get after it kind of got into my mind because it's just repetition. I kept repeating, and I was like, what the hell? I've heard it before, but why does he keep saying it? And he is also a fan of the material put out by Echelon Front and the Willink Babin folks, that whole platform. And so because I was poking fun at Jordan a little bit, thank you, Jordan, that led me on to this material. And so that's a great example of being a big tough farmer, right? And so I inadvertently was influenced by Jordan, and then I opened myself up to other material, and I became open to their material, and then I allowed them to influence me. And then hopefully through this podcast, I am now going to be influencing you. That's the point. And ultimately, leadership is being influenced and then influencing others. And that's how we do it. That's how we do it. So I'm going to go through some of the things that we're going to be talking about briefly. I just want to go through the Big Tough Farmer, the core tenets and principles that I put together. The motto of BTF is sharper every day. We are under the obligation to sharpen ourselves every day and to make ourselves better every day. And at the end of every day, we're going to ask ourselves what we did wrong, what we did right, and how we can improve those things. We're also going to sharpen the other people around us, which is often hard to do because we have to hold people accountable to a certain level, a certain expectation. When you have a high standard, a high expectation, and people are around you are not performing up to that expectation, there is a way to do it, nicely and intellectually, to where you don't offend the other person. But you do need there is an expectation. And so, just the other day, I had a fellow farmer friend who had booked something with me, and she kind of begged out of it a little bit, which wasted a little bit of my time. And so, while that wasn't a major problem, I did let her know. I did communicate to her that I was not happy with her doing that. Please don't do that to me in the future. And I did it in a way to where it might have been a little awkward, but she got the message. And then I followed up by telling her that I appreciated that she took the feedback so well, right? So when you hold other people at high expectations and you have to check somebody and they respond well, they're open to your criticism, your constructive criticism, you should praise them for not getting pissed off, right? I mean, that means that they're a great person if they're willing to take some unsolicited advice, from you. And so we had the expectation that we're going to sharpen ourselves, but also sharpen those around you. Again, we're taking this from Proverbs, from the Bible, which is a great source of just generations of wisdom literature. And I'll read it again. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The reason that I incorporated this into it, the moment that I was like, I really like iron sharpens iron thing, was because I had a good friend of mine, Tom Ziegler, who's in the professional development industry. His dad, Zig Ziglar, and I was at a training that they put on in Dallas a handful of years ago, and there was some planning with the curriculum that I disagreed with, that I did not like, and I was very honest with Tom. If you know me, I can get a little feisty, and I got a little feisty with Tom, and Tom replied to something of the effect of, most people don't talk to me that way. And I said, Tom, you need to hear this. And I was like, you put your pants on just like I do, and so I need to tell you this. And then during that conversation, which he was extremely open to, and that day he won so much respect from me, and he said, iron sharpens iron, and I really did appreciate that. And that conversation meant so much, and that the idea of iron sharpens iron was solidified in my mind after that conversation. Again, I was in a situation where I was holding somebody else accountable to be sharper. I was hoping to influence the other person, and in the process, I also was influenced and sharpened. And so that's how it works. A sharper every day. A big tough farmer gets sharper every day and sharpens people around him. The slogan, being a Boy Scout, we've got things like be prepared and do a good turn daily. And so I felt the desire to break BTF down. The slogan is to sharpen and be sharpened, just like what I talked about. We're going to be sharpening ourselves. We're going to be sharpening other people around us, but we ourselves need to be sharpened every day as well. What is the process? The process is self, goals, team, and leadership. We're going to work on ourselves. We're going to work on our goals. We're going to build a team of people to help us achieve those goals. And we need to work on our leadership style in order to lead that team that we've assembled, in order to work on your goals. It's a circular process. While you're working on yourself, you also have to be working on your team. Your team is going to be working on you to improve you, and so it's not a linear process. It's very circular, and there's circles inside the circles. Speaking of circles, what are the circles of influence? Mental, moral, physical, social, and ecological. We need to work on ourselves mentally. We need to work on ourselves morally and ethically. We need to work on ourselves physically. And when I say physically, yes, we need to watch what we eat. We need to stay in shape. We need to do things that make us better physically as well. Social, we need to make sure that we have friends in our lives, and then we put effort into our social areas. And ecological, as farmers, we're stewards of the earth, right? And so there's a big ecological component to it. That's what we're doing here. What are the missions and goals? To equip farmers with tools that are normally not utilized in farming. Oftentimes the things that we're going to be talking about, we might refer to as soft skills, as people skills, leadership skills, management skills, personal development skills, self-help skills. I hate the term self-help so much because it's full of whenever I think of self-help, I think of shysters and influencers online are giving you a whole bunch of bullshit and making you think that it's easy to become a millionaire or whatever they're, bullshit that they're trying to sell. But it is still it is in that genre of self-help. You go to the bookstore, library, there's a self-help aisle. The joke that I tell sometimes about the self-help aisle in the library or the bookstore is that we would rather get caught in the pornography section of the bookstore or library than the self-help section of the library, because we don't want people to see us trying to improve ourselves. It's like, oh my God, heaven forbid that I am looking up literature and books to try to get better, right? Like, how embarrassing is that? We're going to discuss topics that are often ignored, glazed over, and we're going to start conversations about those things, right? We're here to create community. We're here to have fun. We're here to learn, and to be positive. What are some of the positive emotions that we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about being creative, peaceful, thankful, respectful, accepted, proud, inquisitive, optimistic, curious. And then we're going to be harnessing those things to fight the negative emotions that many farmers feel. Farmers often feel sad, isolated, powerless, disgusted, disappointed, angry, frustrated, disrespected, withdrawn, fearful, exposed, overwhelmed, bad, tired, and rushed. The truth of the matter is that I want to talk about these things because within agriculture and with the farming community, it's frowned upon to talk about these things. Farmer suicide rate is extremely high with everything that's going on right now economically, weather patterns changing. It's a very stressful time for farmers. It's always a stressful time for farmers because they're dealing with things that they can't control, weather. And we're going to talk about what you can do to control the weather and what your strategies are going to be, your plan's going to be. How are you going to plan years in advance to do what you can to circumvent negative weather events. And you may say, oh my God, Grant, my farm got flooded and stuff. And I get you, being from New Orleans. My retail store was open for not even 2 years when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and lost most of my shit, and had to go to Austin and all these things. So I completely appreciate the destructive nature and the unpredictable nature of weather. Having said that, even while Hurricane Katrina was bearing down on us, I was coming up with a plan of what I was going to be able to do after that. And in the weeks after Hurricane Katrina, I rewrote my business plan, and I rallied, and we're still here today in different form. Of course, it's been over 20 years, or almost about 20 years since then. And but if it wasn't for that on the time pivoting that we did because of negative weather, we wouldn't have made it if we hadn't put that effort in with it. Farmers are completely isolated. They don't want to talk about suicide. And after going through every podcast, some podcast searches that I went through, I don't know how many podcasts I listened to talking about farmers' mental health. It was kind of like repetitious, right? It was it was stating the facts. Farmers have mental health challenges. Farmers have difficulty finding mental health because they're in rural areas. It's just not available. Mental health to the general public is hard to find. And so when you're a farmer living in a rural area, it's even harder to find. Farmers don't want to talk about it. They don't want to ask for help. It'll talk about how to look out for signs. If your farmer friend is depressed, it's like, are they taking care of their crops? Are they taking care of their equipment? Are they giving stuff away? Look out for those things. And it will tell you, hey, there are some of these resources. It'll give you like the suicide hotline number, but that's it. They kind of state the obvious, right? They're like, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening, and the why is that farmers are isolated. They can't control commodity prices. They can't control the weather. They can't control disease. Things die. They're dealing with either crop mortalities or livestock mortalities, and so they're all stating the obvious, but they're not actually making an effort to do the training of what you can do on your own if you're a farmer and then you need some of this information. So what are you going to do? So having said some of these things that we were going to talk about here at BTF, we're going to be giving you the tools and the resources to deal with this on your own, right? So that's why I want to go book heavy on this platform, is that you can, a lot of the books that we're going to go over do have an audiobook version, so you can download the audiobook and you can listen during your workday. You can order the book, the physical book, and then you can read it. You can go to the authors. Currently, most authors have their own podcast, or they have their own YouTube channel, or they have some other sort of community platform that you can join and participate in. So everything that we're going to be talking about, you can follow up with in your own time and in your own schedule. You don't need me. You don't need a therapist. You don't need your spouse. You don't need your best friend. And so you don't have to be shy about asking for help with this. So just like the day that I was having a shitty day doing the chores, and I was listening to Extreme Ownership, I was listening to Dichotomy of Leadership that day, even though that I was by myself, just because I had that audiobook on my iPhone with my Bluetooth earbuds in, that was enough to motivate me to get through the day. And so I encourage you to become untraditional in the sources for help. You can withdraw into books, and you can withdraw into positive podcasts and whatever. So I really encourage you to delve into those things. So we briefly covered Extreme Ownership, and we briefly covered the dichotomy of leadership, only talking about the references to BTF in those books, Big Tough Frogman, and how those influenced me to copy and rip off their idea so blatantly and turn it into Big Tough Farmer. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be discussing. On our first episode, again, this is intro episode 0. We are going to be going into the book Stubborn by Andy Bobcaygeon Junkin. These are all my notes on all the books. We're probably going to have over an hour or 2 hour episode on going through this book. This author does not know I'm doing this. I did not interview this author. We're just going to read the book, and we're going to talk about what's in the book. And if you want to listen to this book before we discuss it on the next episode, you can actually go to their website and get a free download of the book to listen to. So there you go. It's a free resource for you to check out the book Stubborn by Andy Bobcaygeon Junkin. And so we're going to go over this book in detail. It was extremely honest, and I really did appreciate it. And there's so many things that I related to personally in this book, and we're going to mention some of those things. And so so that's what we're going to talk about on episode 1. We're going to go book by book down the my reading book list. I have been focused on reading these types of books now for over 20 years, since I opened up our store in 2003, and I have lots of titles, and I have lots of notes, and I have plenty to talk about. And I will say that almost every wisdom literature book and self-help book and improvement book and getting you sharper book, they've all, for the most part, have proven to be true in my now 21 entrepreneurial agricultural business career. And so we're going to be going through those things, and I'll give my personal perspective or opinion, but we're going to bring them up that way that you have a reference resource so you can go look up those things. So everybody, have a great night. I hope that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, because it's important that we do that, because we want to get the information out to you. And my goal is just to help one person with this platform, and that one person can be me. So even if nobody else subscribes or listens to this this platform, this channel, whatever you want to call it, if it helps me, that's enough, because it is our responsibility to make ourselves sharper. And by doing this and preparing this material in order to be a guide, going through some of this information, it helps me out to get sharper every day. And I'm just hoping that in that process of me getting sharper, I get you sharper, and then you get somebody else sharper, and it just becomes an epidemic of sharpness. So everybody have a good one. I really appreciate it. If you have any comments, please leave them, good, bad, ugly. Don't be shy. If you have any books that you want me to talk about, I'd be more than happy to get the book if I don't have it already, go through the entire thing, and make an entire episode out of it and kind of go over some of the highlights. So everybody have a good one. I appreciate you listening. Thank you.